Thank you, counsel. Justice Thomas? Justice Alito?
One of the reasons for heightened scrutiny is to ferret out whether the asserted reason for a challenged law or provision is actually the real reason for the provision. And I would appreciate it if you would just say a few words about what can be inferred about the real reason for the provision at issue here from the various exceptions and limitations and the differences in the amount that can be contributed of coordinated expenses that are allowed in most House districts and in those where the candidate runs at large in the state.
Yes, we think the design of that scheme completely refutes any quid pro quo interest and reveals, as Colorado 1 signaled, that the real interest is in trying to have Congress and its incumbents prescribe how much money is appropriate in particular context, how much money should be spent in particular election context. I think the Senate limits are the best example of that. They vary in amount. They're keyed not to some sense of corruption, but to state population, which is a proxy for perhaps how much a media market would cost or how much an election would cost to run. So again, you have a situation where in Wyoming, the party contribution limit is like under $125,000, whereas in California, because of the state population differential, it's like $3.3 million. And that cannot be explained by some sense that people in Wyoming are more corrupt than people in California, or even that that is an appropriate amount to spend on races, given that a lot of Senate campaigns take place in smaller states, say Montana, that might decide control of the Senate. So it's very difficult to discern any quid pro quo rationale from that. And on top of that, the other exceptions, I think, underscore the problem. The state limits that I mentioned with respect to having exemptions for get out the vote efforts or bumper stickers. If there's any difference in corrupting potential when a donor decides it wants to somehow ferry through a quid pro quo scheme because there's unlimited money on bumper stickers versus something else, no one has pointed to one. And then we've sort of thoroughly canvassed the national exceptions as well for recounts and litigation. They just, in no sane world are those keyed to some sort of concern with quid pro quos. The only reasonable explanation is they're keyed to judgments, impermissible judgments, about how much money is appropriate to spend on particular forms of campaigning or election speech in particular kinds of states.